act on what we preach, from a point of view of how do we look at evolving the way we teach, the way we do teaching and learning, to ensure that we are ensuring that students are ready for the world of work, which is changing rapidly.
In this episode, we will be addressing not only the current status quo of skills in the financial services sector, but importantly, the value chain in the sector, where skills gaps lie, and how the education space can enable not only lifelong learning, critical when faced with a rapidly evolving technological environment, but establishing the building blocks to fill this skills gap. To help us with this conversation, we enlist the insights of an incredible mind in the industry, David Venter, who is also the head of the School of Financial Services at Milpark Education and is no stranger to the world of finance. David, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
It's an absolute pleasure, Ayanda. Good to spend this time with you.
Yeah. So the financial services sector is a significant driver of our economy. And if there's any sector, David, that is in need of capacity, is indeed this sector. When you think about the financial services sector, you think traditional, you think stiff, you think all things intimidating. I'm intimidated just thinking about the financial services sector. And so the question really, for a creative mind, an interested mind like yours, why are you so passionate about the sector?
I gained an interest in the investment management sector after I actually left school. So it was very much when I was in school, that wasn't even on my radar. And I was very fortunate for a couple of years to work in the States after school while I was saving money to study at university. And over that period, I read quite a bit. And a lot of the subjects and topic areas which I enjoyed was in the investment space. So it became quite apparent to me that was more something which I'd enjoy studying. And so when I came back after a couple of years in the States and started my studies, I moved towards that kind of arena. And I was very fortunate that I got a role at a relatively young age within a hedge fund business. And they gave me experience which was invaluable because it was a smaller institution. It was a small hedge fund and fund management practice, and I was able to then get a broad idea of and broad experience across many areas within a traditional investment management business. So that was a great intro to industry, and I have always thoroughly enjoyed the financial markets, with the idea, as I was mentioning before we started the podcast, the idea was originally to always go into academia. I was always keen to be in a teaching role. What we're doing within Milpark is, and the way we are approaching education, that's something which is very exciting.
Sure.
We have had, I think it's always hard for someone to understand who's outside of a higher education institution, the pace at which one can rejig the whole learning experience and the areas on which one would concentrate to better align with the ways of work in the future and the skills required by graduates in the industry. And so that's something which also motivates me. And it's not something which is easy to change overnight. But I know I was listening to one of your prior podcasts on the way in. And in that podcast, one of our academic leaders, Judith de Blanche, was just talking around how looking at the learning and teaching space,
Sure,
from a point of view of how do we live out our vision and mission of creating students who are human first, digitally fluent, South African inspired, globally relevant, creative problem solvers and resilient enactors. So it's always a thing of, I quite enjoy the education space and being within our school and within Milpark education as a whole, where we are being challenged to think, how do we not only act on what we preach, from point of view of how do we look at evolving the way we teach, the way we do teaching and learning, to ensure that we are ensuring that students are ready for the world of work, which is changing rapidly.
David, we're in a new normal, right? Everyone, especially industry, is required to adapt. We're required to pivot. We're required to embrace new technologies. What are some of the requirements of education itself as a product in order to do exactly what we're talking about? This challenging balance that must be created or established in order to create these minds. What is required of these educators?
All of the building blocks for the financial services sector are still the same. However, there are technological advancements which are coming in, which relate to, I call it there's a technological overlay. So there is a technological overlay over the original building blocks. If we look at how technology is evolving over the last 12 to 18 months with regards to AI, with regards to various automation tools, there's a proliferation of new tools coming online. And for us as an education institution to be able to start integrating some of those tools, some of those ways for helping our students to orientate themselves as to how to potentially best be ready to be able to test, try out, and find use cases for those tools. Because when they enter the world of work, they may be thrown, okay, here's XYZ tool which we utilize within our institution. Try and figure out how best, how to utilize it and how best to figure it out. Of course, there's always training wheels in those situations, but at the same time, being able to be self-directed and figure out for yourself, this is how to use this tool, this is how to use that tool. There's many ways that we can integrate that within the educational journey. Now, I'm not saying we figured this out yet.
Yep.
So I think, I don't want to pretend, that Milpark Education has figured out how we're going to integrate within our curriculum all of, the various tools that are used in financial services now, or what, the new emerging, tools which will be best suited for the future. But I can't promise that. But what I can promise is that as a educational provider,
yes,
and as a higher education provider, we are actively thinking about assessing, looking at use cases,
sure,
seeing how it's going to potentially affect industry, and how it's potentially going to affect the world of work, and looking to see how it could potentially assist in the educational journey for students too.
Now, when we talk about the world of work, David, work in itself is a producer of goods and services and products, right? This means that there's the elements and dynamics of supply and demand, there's consumer trends and needs involved in all of that. What about the needs of the customer, the needs of consumers, actually necessitates the incorporation of AI, for example, in the financial services sector, which would then, and I know I'm sort of reverse engineering this question, which would then require a different mode of thinking in terms of how educators then prepare and, creative minds that are going to go into industry.
One of the key aspects to that is for our graduates and for us to be actively thinking how we prepare our graduates to approach problems and requirements within the work world, within financial services, with a frame of how do we provide goods and services within financial services that create the kind of smooth delivery, efficiency gains that we would like with any product or provider.
That is amazing. That is amazing.
So to see how, if you look, for instance, at generative AI could potentially have very useful use cases with regards to customer service, with regards to answering frequently asked questions. We actually had a training day a few weeks ago with the with a senior leadership team within Milpark, and we had some AI experts come in just to present us potential use cases across all the tools that they're aware of. And that was it was a massive eye-opener for me. But just to see, for instance, there are lots of technologies which are useful for instance, getting the efficiency gains with regards to better customer service, faster customer service through generative AI, let's say, for answering questions. There'll be, however, there'll be a requirement for different skills, of which primarily it'll be looking at how one creates the data sets for those type of, let's, for want of a better word, custom GPTs or custom AIs. So yeah, I think there's going to be a need also from an educational perspective to be looking more at, yes, we know what the fundamental building blocks are within financial services. What are the additional add-on pluses which could be helpful? Like, for instance, understanding data analysis, understanding automation, data analytics, various tools. Overall, the main aim of all of these things is to look at how best we can create improved customer experiences for the customer within financial services. Just like at Milpark Education, we're looking at student experience.
Sure.
So how can we improve student experience? Same thing.
Absolutely. In fact, the industry itself, in my novice mind, I would have thought that the financial services industry would have resisted AI the most because it's a very structured industry. You know, the saying goes, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I almost feel like, AI came in to expose gaps that the industry itself didn't even know existed, which is great from a development point of view. Maybe, as an expert in the field, David, what does the industry look like to demand such an active infusion of AI innovation tools, and just digital proficiency? What does this industry look like right now?
So of course, there's a lot of the times if we have legacy, if we're sitting within the financial services industry, and a lot of big companies will have legacy systems which they will have to move towards being able to integrate a lot of the new technology. So it'll be obviously harder for the big institutions to be able to move their ships in such a way that they can integrate a lot of the new technologies, and there are active programs in place with a lot of these institutions to do that. I think that's where it ends up being a gap in the industry for a lot of for certain fintech startups and or product providers, in that because they are able to move straight away to providing a new system without having to bother with the legacy systems of integration for across the board. That makes it obviously easy. There is definitely a gap there for first-time movers, but at the same time, a lot of the large legacy financial service institutions are investing a lot of money to reorientate themselves so they can take advantage of it as well. So in the end, clients are looking for tailored delivery channels for themselves. Not all clients, but certain clients. And the question is, how big a market is there for the delivery channel that you are proposing? So, before COVID-19, I always wonder whether, for instance, Checkers 6060 and Pick and Pay ASAP and all those, whether they would have been able to, what kind of investment they would have had to make in from a marketing point of view to actually get the uptick in people trying to utilize a service like that. And now it's a question of, for most people, because we were forced to do it during COVID-19, it has become a delivery channel which has had massive uptake because it's created efficiency gains for people. Because the average person is thinking, after hours, oh crumbs, I need to have this and this delivered tomorrow morning would be really nice. In fact, tomorrow morning between 11 and 12 is actually when it'll be best, because then there'll be someone to take it from the door. So just like with that, of creating a product which makes the lived customer experience better, will be the same for financial services. Everything will be the same from point of view of, it'll just be now, what are we packaging, how are we packaging, and how are we packaging in a way to make it a better customer experience for the customer. You know.
Remaining curious, David, is one of the key requirements of learning and teaching. Both the teacher and the learner must remain curious in order to provide a service and a product that is going to equip a mind that is ready to pivot and to respond to the challenges of industry. That conversation, in case you have just joined us, with David Venter, who is a former hedge fund manager, as well as the current head of the School for Financial Services at Milpark Education, exploring the skills gap in the financial services sector and how we can bridge this through education, as well as looking at the concept of lifelong learning. Now, David, as before we let you go, I know you'd like to say something to somebody that is in the industry, somebody that is a student, and somebody that is reluctant, in applying different ways of learning, applying different ways of teaching, perhaps even applying themselves to the reality of this dynamic and changing environment that we can all look forward to. What are your last thoughts on the matter?
Yeah, my last thoughts on it is that students can be very excited about the world ahead. I think we live in a world where people are automatically, I'm the same. People like to have certainty. People like to have the same. People don't like change. People would like to be able to predict the future easier. And with this new world, it seems unpredictable. But in a way, I would just like to encourage students to be excited about the world of work ahead. I think there's also something which is very, very, very important for students to keep in mind is building blocks, as I said earlier. The building blocks are still the same within financial services. So the curriculum and learning around that is still the same. There's technology overlays, which is important, and that's a big topic of which we spoke about today. But the additional value add from all students is still, and from prospective employees, is still a lot of the soft skills. So which is going to become more and more prevalent, I think, within the world of work is communication skills, being able to convey information clearly and effectively. Being teamwork will still be important. So being able to work in groups to achieve common goals, being a good team player. Problem solving. How going into the work world and into the education world to think, how can as a student, how can I problem solve this issue, identify this, find an effective solution for that. Being adaptable, being curious, as I said already, looking at efficient time management, that's also going to become a big thing. So having solid emotional intelligence, so understanding and managing one's own emotions and recognizing and influencing the emotions of others, being able to influence will be important. And of course, critical thinking. So a lot of critical thinking will also continue to be a big thing. So a lot of those, what we call soft skills, are going to become, I think, more and more of a value add and more of a differentiator, as opposed to necessarily strong technical skills. They'll still be important, but that's going to be important.
Soft skills will become a differentiator as opposed to technical skills. That's where we leave it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with those shaping the workforce of tomorrow. It is indeed Control Alt Succeed with our guest in studio, David Venter. Thank you so much for having given us your time.